The old farmhouse on the edge of the Blackwood Forest had been in Serena's family for generations, but she was the first to turn its sprawling barn into a proper wildlife rescue. Where others saw a crumbling relic, she saw a sanctuary. The main barn aisle was a clean, well-swept corridor of makeshift enclosures, each holding a story of survival: a fox with a broken leg, a family of orphaned raccoons, a hawk with a damaged wing. Her life was a symphony of small, purposeful tasks: mixing formula, changing bandages, cleaning wounds. It was a quiet, often lonely life, but it was hers, and she found deep satisfaction in the trust she earned from creatures that most of the world feared or forgot. The call had come in just after dusk from a panicked hiker who'd been on one of the deeper trails. His voice crackled over her old radio, describing a giant wolf, caught in what sounded like a leg-hold trap, its howls of pain echoing through the gathering dark. Most people would have called the park rangers, but Serena knew the bureaucracy could take hours, and a trapped animal, especially a large predator, didn't have that kind of time. Grabbing her heavy-duty medical kit, a thick blanket, and a pair of bolt cutters, she loaded everything into her beat-up truck and headed into the forest. The deeper she drove, the more the civilized world fell away, replaced by the ancient, watchful silence of the pines. She found the spot the hiker had described, a small clearing near a creek. And there he was. The hiker's description had not done him justice. The wolf was enormous, a creature of myth and shadow, his fur a deep, smoky gray that seemed to absorb the fading light. His powerful body was taut with strain, one back leg cruelly locked in the rusted iron jaws of a trap, the metal teeth sunk deep. But it was his eyes that held her frozen. They were a brilliant, startling blue, and they blazed not with mindless animal fury, but with a fierce, intelligent agony and a proud, desperate fear. This was no ordinary wolf. Every instinct for self-preservation screamed at her to retreat. This was a top predator, powerful enough to kill her with a single, desperate lunge. But the part of her that couldn't turn away from a creature in pain was stronger. She saw past the sharp teeth and the trapped fury. She saw the profound suffering in those intelligent blue eyes. She moved slowly, setting her kit down with deliberate quiet, her hands held up to show she was no threat. "It's all right," she murmured, her voice a soft, steady counterpoint to his ragged panting. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to help." She kept talking, a continuous stream of soothing nonsense, about the chill in the air, about the stubborn hawk back at her shelter, about how brave he was. She took a cautious step closer, then another, until she was within arm's reach of the trap. The wolf watched her, a low growl rumbling in his chest, but he didn't snap or lunge. He seemed to be studying her, his blue eyes tracking her every move. Kneeling in the damp earth, she saw the damage was bad. The trap was old and rusted shut. She'd need the bolt cutters. This was the most dangerous part. The sound of the metal and the pressure of freeing the leg would cause a flash of intense pain, and a pained animal was an unpredictable one. She wrapped the thick blanket around his head and shoulders, not to blind him, but to muffle the sound and give him something to bite if he needed. "This is going to hurt," she whispered, her voice filled with genuine apology. "I'm so sorry." Positioning the bolt cutters, she squeezed with all her strength. The old hardened steel groaned in protest, then gave way with a sharp, metallic crack. The wolf flinched violently, a pained yelp escaping from under the blanket. But he held still. As the jaws of the trap sprang open, she gently lifted his injured leg free. It was a bloody, ugly wound. Working quickly, she cleaned it with antiseptic, applied a salve to fight infection, and wrapped it securely in a clean bandage. When she was finished, she sat back on her heels, her own hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline and the intense focus. She carefully removed the blanket from his head. The wolf slowly, carefully, pushed himself to his feet. He stood on 3 legs, holding the injured one up, and looked at her. The growling had completely stopped. There was no sound except for their breathing and the gentle gurgle of the creek. The wolf's intelligent blue eyes seemed to look right into her soul. Then, he did something that shattered any remaining fear in her heart. He limped forward a single step, lowered his great head, and gently nuzzled her hand with his cold, wet nose. A jolt, warm and electric, shot up her arm and spread through her entire body. It was a feeling of connection so profound, so right, that it stole her breath. It was as if a key had turned in a lock she never knew existed inside her soul. The wolf held her gaze for one long, silent moment, imprinting himself upon her very being. Then, with a strength that seemed to return to him, he turned and melted soundlessly into the dark tapestry of the forest, leaving Serena alone in the clearing with a racing heart and a life that felt irrevocably changed. The drive back to her rescue was a blur. The familiar sights of the road home seemed different, charged with a new significance. She didn't know how, and she didn't know why, but she knew, with a certainty that settled deep into her bones, that the wolf with the blue eyes was not gone from her life. Their story, whatever it was, had only just begun, and the quiet, predictable world of her animal shelter would never be enough for her again. The familiar rhythms of the wildlife rescue felt strangely muted and distant to Serena in the days that followed her encounter in the forest. The morning feeding rounds, the meticulous cleaning of enclosures, the gentle administration of medicine, all the tasks that had once given her life purpose and structure now felt like motions she was performing in a dream. Her mind was a constant, swirling reel of that night. The cold, unyielding feel of the trap under her hands, the shocking intelligence in the wolf's brilliant blue eyes, the raw power of his presence, and the shocking, electric warmth that had flooded her when he had nuzzled her hand. It was a feeling that had taken root deep within her, a persistent, humming awareness that her quiet, solitary world had been irrevocably pierced by something ancient, powerful, and dangerously compelling. She found herself pausing in her work, her gaze drifting toward the tree line at the edge of her property, her heart beating a little faster with a foolish, unconscious hope that was always followed by a small, sinking disappointment when she saw only trees and shadows. This strange new reality of waiting, of feeling only half present in her own life, came to an end on the 5th day. She was in the middle of treating the hawk's injured wing, her hands steady as she applied a fresh poultice, when she felt a shift in the air, a subtle change in the quality of the afternoon light falling through the open barn door. She looked up, and there he was. He stood at the entrance to the barn, his tall, broad-shouldered frame silhouetted against the sun. He was dressed simply in dark trousers and a sweater, a stark contrast to the rustic, hay-strewn surroundings of her shelter. His hair was the same deep, smoky gray as the wolf's fur, and his eyes were the exact same shade of brilliant, piercing blue. They were fixed on her with an intensity that made the rest of the world seem to blur and fade into insignificance. For a long, suspended moment, they simply looked at each other. The humming energy in Serena's blood, which had been a constant background noise, now erupted into a roaring, undeniable force. The memory of his proximity, the scent of the forest that still seemed to cling to him, the feel of his intense gaze, all came rushing back, so powerful it made her fingers still on the hawk's wing. The bird, sensing her distraction, gave a soft, ruffled squawk. "Serena," he said, her name a simple, quiet statement on his lips, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. She found her voice, though it was little more than a breath. "Orion." He didn't smile, but the intense focus in his gaze softened almost imperceptibly. He gestured with his chin toward the hawk. "You have a healer's hands," he observed, his voice quiet, meant only for the space between them. "It's what I do," she replied, finally finishing her task and gently placing the hawk back in its enclosure. She wiped her hands on a clean cloth, her heart still hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. He began to visit the rescue after that. He never came during the busy hours, always appearing during the quiet lulls of the late afternoon or early evening. He never offered a flimsy excuse. His presence was its own reason. He would lean against a stall door or sit on an overturned bucket, and they would talk. Their conversation started with the safe, neutral territory of animals, their behaviors, their instincts, their resilience. But slowly, over the course of several weeks, the walls between his world and hers began to crumble. Standing beside the enclosure of the recovering fox, he told her that the trap he'd been caught in was set by poachers who had no respect for the balance of the forest. He spoke of his family, a vast, complicated network bound not just by blood but by a loyalty that was stronger than steel. He spoke of a responsibility that was demanding and often brutal, of decisions that had to be made for the protection of the land and those who depended on him. He never used the word werewolf, but he painted a vivid picture of a parallel society with its own justice, its own harsh laws, and its own heavy, inescapable burdens. One evening, as a soft twilight settled over the farm and the first fireflies began to blink in the tall grass, he finally laid the full, unvarnished truth before her. They were sitting on the porch steps of her farmhouse, the sounds of the nocturnal insects creating a gentle symphony around them. "The wolf you found, that is my other form," he said, his voice low and serious, the words hanging in the warm, still air. "I am the alpha of the midnight star pack, Serena. The world I live in is not a kind one. It is built on things your world is blessedly ignorant of." He watched her, his blue eyes searching for the fear, the disgust, the inevitable retreat. "We are not the monsters the old stories make us out to be. We are about family. About protection. About a code of honor that is older than these woods. But the price for that is a life where trust is rare and danger is a constant companion." Serena listened, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Every sensible, self-preserving instinct she possessed screamed at her to end this, to tell him she couldn't be a part of his life. But looking into his eyes, she didn't see a monster. She saw the immense, solitary weight he carried, a crown of thorns he had been born to wear. She saw the man who, despite the violence that was an undeniable part of his existence, had never been anything but respectful, patient, and deeply vulnerable with her. She saw a loneliness in him that was a perfect mirror of her own. The danger he represented was a cold, hard fact, but the connection she felt to him was a warm, living, breathing thing, a magnetic pull that defied all logic and common sense. Their friendship, built on these quiet confessional evenings surrounded by the gentle sounds of her recovering animals, slowly began to transform into something deeper, more potent, and infinitely more real. It was in the way his hand would gently brush against hers when she handed him a cup of coffee. It was in the long, comfortable silences they shared, simply sitting together on the porch, a world of unspoken understanding passing between them. It was in the soft, lingering kisses they began to exchange in the quiet of her farmhouse after the sun had set. Kisses that started out hesitant and exploratory and grew in confidence and passion with each meeting. They were kisses that spoke of a deep, aching need and a love that was flourishing in the most unlikely of places, a pure and powerful bond forming in the space between healing and wildness. The air between them crackled with a mature, intense romance, a connection built on a foundation of utter trust and a soul-deep recognition that they had each found a missing piece of themselves in the other. One evening, he didn't come to the farm. Instead, a single, unassuming truck was waiting for her outside. He was inside. He took her deep into the Blackwood forest, down a path she had never seen, to a hidden valley where a community of cabins was nestled among the ancient trees. The people moved with a fluid, natural grace, and they watched her with curious, but not unkind, eyes. "This is my home," he said softly, his hand resting on the small of her back as he guided her. "This is the world I am sworn to protect." Under the vast, star-strewn sky, he turned her to face him. "This life I lead, it is violent. It is dark," he whispered, his voice raw with a vulnerability she knew was reserved for her alone. "But you, Serena, you are the only pure thing in it. You are the light that makes every shadow worth facing." He wasn't asking a question. He was stating a fact as solid as the earth beneath their feet. It was a confession, a vow, and a declaration of a love that felt both terrifying and utterly, completely inevitable. Serena looked at him, at the powerful, dangerous man who was showing her his most guarded, human self, and she knew. She knew with every fiber of her being that her own heart had chosen him, not in spite of the shadows, but because of the profound, fierce light of his honor and love that fought to live within them. "I know," she whispered back, her voice thick with emotion. "Your world is what it is, Orion. But my heart has found its home. And it's with you." The life Serena had always known, a world defined by the predictable cycles of healing and the quiet solitude of her farm, now existed in a delicate and profound balance with the shadowed, potent reality of Orion's existence. Her days were still filled with the vital, comforting rituals of the rescue, the careful mixing of formula for the orphaned raccoons, the gentle changing of bandages on the fox's leg, the patient hours spent coaxing the hawk to trust her enough to stretch its healing wing. But her life outside those duties, the quiet moments that belonged only to her, were now infused with a different kind of energy, a current of fierce devotion and unwavering protection that both humbled and thrilled her. She learned the subtle language of his world not through dramatic confrontations, but through the quiet, seamless ways his presence enveloped her life. The fences around her property were mysteriously reinforced with stronger wire one weekend. Her supply of medical goods from the nearest town began to arrive with surprising speed and consistency. A member of his pack, a quiet young woman named Kale, started showing up regularly, claiming to be a volunteer, her sharp eyes missing nothing as she helped clean enclosures. Serena saw that Orion's power was not just in command, but in the deep, unshakable loyalty he inspired, a loyalty she now understood was earned through a fierce, protective code that extended to anyone he claimed as his own. And she saw the way he looked at her when they walked through the pack's hidden village, the hard edges of his face softening into an expression of such pure, unguarded devotion it made her heart feel too large for her chest. The look of a man who had spent his life navigating a battlefield and had finally found his reason to seek peace. Their love deepened and matured in these intertwined moments, becoming an unshakable fortress built not on grand, dramatic gestures, but on 1,000 small, unspoken acts of care. It was in the way he would sometimes just watch her work, his presence a warm, solid anchor in her focused world. It was in the gentle, possessive way his hand would rest on her waist when they stood together, a silent declaration to the world and to his own pack that she was his most cherished responsibility. It was in the slow, deep kisses they shared in the stillness of the forest under the full moon, kisses that were no longer just about passion, but about promise and a desperate, shared hope for a future they were building brick by careful brick against a backdrop of inherent danger. The bond between them was no longer a thrilling secret or a dangerous rebellion. It was the very core of her existence, the new foundation upon which she was rebuilding her entire understanding of love, sacrifice, and what it meant to be truly, completely cherished. But the peace of their carefully constructed world was a beautiful, temporary sanctuary, a calm harbor in a storm that was steadily gathering force. The tension Orion carried, a low hum she had learned to read in the tightness of his shoulders, began to sharpen into something more acute, more immediate. His pack members, while still respectful, became more vigilant, their easy laughter less frequent. The man who could lose himself in the simple pleasure of helping her repair a fence post was now often distracted, his head tilting as if hearing a distant sound, his expression growing grim. The threat, when he finally explained it to her with a heavy, reluctant heart, was insidious and slow-moving. A strange illness was spreading among the deer and smaller game of the forest, a lethargic wasting sickness that left them disoriented and weak. It was decimating the primary food source for the wolf pack, threatening the delicate balance of their entire ecosystem. The pack was facing starvation. A cold, sharp dread, colder than the water in the rescue's well, coiled in Serena's stomach. The danger was no longer an abstract concept from a story Orion told her. It was a silent, creeping threat that could destroy his people from within. Her fear was a physical, chilling presence, not for herself, but for the slow, agonizing decline it would force upon the pack, for the desperation it would breed, for the love that would be strained under the weight of hunger and fear. Orion, as Alpha, had to lead his strongest hunters on a dangerous journey far beyond their normal territory, into lands contested by rival packs, to find new, uncontaminated hunting grounds. It was a perilous undertaking, a trek through unfamiliar and potentially hostile lands that carried the constant risk of conflict and the very real possibility of returning empty-handed. The morning the hunting party left, the village was blanketed in a heavy, anxious silence. Orion stood before Serena outside her farmhouse, his hands cradling her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. His eyes were pools of fierce determination and unwavering love. "You must stay here, at the rescue," he said, his voice low and firm, a command laced with a desperate plea. "Kale will be with you. Do not go into the deep woods alone. The forest is sick, and sickness makes the wild unpredictable. Prey is scarce, and predators are growing desperate. Promise me you will be safe." Serena could only nod. her throat too tight with the terror of what was to come to form any words. She pressed a small, smooth hawk feather she always carried in her pocket for luck into his palm. "For strength," she whispered. "Come back to me." He closed his fingers around it, his expression softening for a fleeting, heart-breaking second before he leaned in and kissed her. It was a kiss filled with all the love and fear and desperate hope that swirled in the air around them. Then he was gone, shifting into his powerful wolf form and leading his warriors on their perilous quest, leaving behind a void of waiting that seemed to swallow all sound. The next day, the wildlife rescue felt less like a sanctuary and more like a fortress under siege. Kale was a quiet, capable presence, but her constant, watchful vigilance was a grim reminder of the silent crisis unfolding in the forest. The hours dragged by, each one feeling longer and more suffocating than the last. The not knowing was a special kind of torture. Driven by her nature to heal and a need to be useful, to contribute to the pack's survival in the only way she knew how, she began a methodical investigation. She collected water samples from the streams that fed into the forest, examined plants for blight, and studied the behavior of the few sickly animals that stumbled onto her property. It was careful, scientific work, born of a desire to help, not of a reckless disregard for his warning. Her diligence led her to a discovery. A small, normally clear tributary that ran along the northern edge of her land had a faint, chemical smell. Following it upstream, she found the source, a pile of rotting, leaking containers of unknown chemicals that had apparently washed down from an illegal dumping site during the last heavy rain. The poison was slowly leaching into the water, sickening the animals that drank from it. Working with Kale and a few other pack members who were amazed by her deduction, she organized a careful effort to remove the containers and divert the stream to allow the earth to cleanse itself. She had found the sickness at its source. When Orion and his hunters returned, weary and with little game to show for their dangerous journey, he was met not with more bad news, but with a solution. His pack told him of Serena's quiet bravery, her intelligence, and her profound respect for their home. He found her not waiting idly, but on her knees, her hands stained with earth, directing the final stages of the cleanup. He saw not just his mate, but a partner, a woman whose human knowledge and healer's heart had protected his wolf pack in a way his own strength and power could not. The relief and awe that transformed his face was a sight she would remember forever. In the quiet aftermath, as the pack celebrated the turning of the tide and the forest began its slow recovery, the reality of the choice before her settled over Serena. She stood with Orion on the porch of her farmhouse, the place that had represented her independence and was now a testament to how deeply their lives were intertwined. The warm, familiar space was filled with the sounds of recovering animals and the hopeful energy of a pack reborn. He held both her hands in his touch infinitely gentle, his expression stripped bare of all its power and authority, showing only the raw, vulnerable man beneath, a man who was offering her his heart along with his dangerous world. "Serena," he began, his voice hoarse with a fatigue that went deeper than bone. "You have a life. A good, honest, safe life where you are needed and respected. My life is here, bound to this land and this pack. It will always hold challenges, dangers that your human world does not. The choice of where you build your future, it must be yours, Serena. I will love you forever, no matter where you are." Serena looked around at the rescue, at the animals she had healed and the home she had made. She thought of the simple, profound peace of her work, the joy of a successful release back into the wild. Then she looked at Orion. She saw the man whose world she had just helped to save. She saw the leader who carried the weight of his people on his shoulders, and the man who looked at her as if she were his only salvation. She saw her past, her present, and her only possible future in his tormented, loving eyes. She squeezed his hands, her own decision crystal clear, a truth that had been forged in the fire of crisis and sealed in the quiet triumph of healing. "My heart has never been about a safe life, Orion," she said, her voice clear and strong, filled with a love that had been tested and had not broken. "It stopped being just mine the moment I found you in that trap. My heart is your shelter, and I am yours, completely. I choose you. I choose this life. I choose us, no matter what challenges it holds." The relief and all-consuming love that transformed his face was the most beautiful healing she had ever witnessed. He pulled her into his arms, and their lips met in a kiss that was deeper and more profound than any they had shared before. It was a kiss of promise, of a future chosen and embraced with open eyes and a courageous heart, a permanent seal on a bond that had been tested by adversity and forged in unwavering partnership and love. And as Serena stood there, wrapped in the arms of her wolf, her mate, her equal, she knew their story was far from over. The most powerful chapter was just beginning. If you were captivated by the deep, powerful love between Serena and Orion, there are countless more stories of wild hearts and the fierce bonds that tame them waiting to be discovered. To be the first to know when the next chapter of their journey unfolds, and to lose yourself in other tales where love heals the most wounded souls, be sure to subscribe. Your next unforgettable adventure into a world where compassion meets wild devotion is just a click away.